Good afternoon, everyone. So I've heard of a Jesus complex. Maybe I'm the first one with the Charlton Heston complex. So one of the best things about being CEO, one of the few things that's great about being CEO is I have the illusion that I can control my own calendar. And last week, because everything for the show was going great, and because I have such a great team, I took my whole family to Hawaii. I said, you know what could happen in a week in our industry? Well, I got back, and Google gets a new CEO. Demand Media does an incredible IPO. We see democracy breaking out in the Middle East, and so I guess that's just 1 week. So I'm glad I'm back, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of my views about what's happening in the industry. First off, just a quick show of hands. How many people is this their first DomainFest ever? All right, not bad. How about your second? Third? Fourth? Fifth? This is, if you can believe it, our 5th annual DomainFest Global being held here in Los Angeles. I want to thank everybody for coming. If it's your first time, talk to people who've been here before. You can see it's going to be a great, great program. I want to thank a couple of people that have come in. It's great to look out across the faces. I see a bunch of actually former overseers, probably like half the room it looks like, but it's wonderful to see all you guys and appreciate you joining us every year. It's like a little family reunion to get you guys all together and talk with us. I want to thank Frank. I don't know if everybody knows, but he got up really early this morning to talk to everybody, Frank Schilling, about monetization, and he's been oversubscribed for his Ask the Experts panel. So I really want to thank Frank for his participation, and I'm humbled by actually all the caliber of speakers, industry experts, industry participants that we have at this year's show. You're not going to believe that we're close to 700 people at this year's show. We have over 37 sponsors. This is a record year for attendees, for sponsorships. For anybody who thinks that our industry is having challenges or isn't doing so well, I just ask you to point to this room and all the people enjoying the sun outside, and you can see how thriving we are as an industry. I want to talk about our 10 predictions, or maybe in light of the 10 Commandments, our 10 prophecies for what's happening in 2011. But let me review a little bit and kind of talk to you about what's going on at Oversea and how this past year was. People ask me, how was the year? Well, the year was good, although as many of you went through, it was a tough start. Kind of to use an analogy, we had all these storm clouds. It was really a tough year in 2009. Those continued in the beginning of 2010, and we had some challenges. But as the year went on, people started hitting their stride. I think many of you felt like people started getting more optimistic. Domain name prices started to go up. People were selling more. They were buying more. Consumers were coming back, and it became a great time again to invest in the industry. Just some quick highlights for 2010 for Oversea. Under the leadership of Craig Snyder, our aftermarket division saw 50% growth in the aftermarket. I want to thank Monty Khan and the rest of the leadership team who allowed us to achieve this goal faster than industry growth within our aftermarket division. Under Rob McClin and Craig, 10% growth in our moniker registrar. That's a revenue number. On a name count you guys have probably seen, we saw tremendous growth in the number of names under registration at moniker. We had started our European operations at the end of 2009. In 2010, we really hit our stride under Jorg and his team. We had dramatic growth in our European operations. We thank many of our new customers that are with us today that came from across the seas. I heard that we have over 100 people from outside of the United States, and we thank you for joining us here today. Peter and Deborah Domeyer, who runs our technology group, have worked extraordinarily hard to deal with all the different vicissitudes within our monetization business. And despite all that, we saw a 10% increase in RPC and monetization. We were able to buy a lot more domain names as well for our own portfolio. Under Jack Nelson, our HR director, we saw 50 new employees join Oversea. It was a great time for us to be investing in new products. We'll talk about some of those in a minute. Under Todd Green, we resolved some major litigation. I know all of you in this room agree with me that it was tough when we're fighting with each other as opposed to working together. And we're very, very pleased to have resolved most of the major litigation for our company. We were a little busy under Ryan Berryman, kind of buying some companies, and Liz Murray, our CFO. We acquired some lead gen businesses. Just last week, we announced ShopWiki, our newest company to enter into our vertical markets division, which is now going to be started by Scott Morrow, who's also in the room today. We broke into the mainstream press. I got to tell you, my family was so thrilled to see me on television. But CNBC, CNN, and Smart Business, which I know many, many of you read. But this was really an achievement for the industry, not for us. It was about finally letting the mainstream know about what domaining is, what the value of a domain name is, and people in the middle of, I can't even tell you how many places, finally saw that people were talking about the value of domain name on regular TV. Under Air and VTech, we leveraged our successful DomainFest franchise and ran 4 different events last year, all of which were oversubscribed. We had tons of sponsors. We were in Fort Lauderdale, we were in New York, and we were in Prague. And we've seen that this franchise now is not just great here in Los Angeles, but we can take it on the road, and we're successful in bringing domainers together to talk about the industry. And finally, our continued investments in our technology and how we can bring better solutions for publishers allowed us to do the launch that Peter mentioned this morning about Precision Targeting Engine, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So all in all, it's a good year. And I want to thank the most important people, and that's not just my staff, but it's really our customer base. I want to thank all you guys for the work and support and faith that you put in our staff to make this such a great year. So thank you very, very much. Last year, I stood here and I talked about a couple themes. We talked about internet real estate. We talked about kind of where things were going. And I left you with 3 ideas that I thought was going to be hot in 2010. And while most people make predictions and not want you to go back to it, let's go back to the 3 things that I talked about. The first wasn't so hard to say. There's going to be new traffic sources. You heard from Eli this morning about mobile and social. They were huge, much bigger than anybody expected. But now that we know they're here, how do you leverage them? We're going to talk about that. The second big idea was improving the velocity in domain name aftermarket by reaching retail customers. Again, not necessarily such a brilliant insight, but how do you actually reach those end users? How do you show them the value of a domain name which effectively is not traded, it's not disclosed, prices aren't reported? And we talked about, and I'll continue to talk about, how important it is for the industry to actually reveal the prices. When you sell a domain name, you want to tell people about that, because by having more people talk about price, we get more comparables, we get more people willing to invest in the space. And the third idea was solving the domain build-out gap. And this one, actually, I'd say the jury's probably still out. All of us, our company included, continues to experiment with ways to build out our domain names. We feel like we've got some solutions under lead gen, and there's some things that we're still trying. I know all of you, this is part of the discussions, is how do we continue to think about successful models? And I want to thank some of the startups that have come here that were with us last year in this specific area. So those are the 3 that we talked about last year. As we now move to thinking about this year, one of the benefits of speaking at the end of January is I had the opportunity to read what all of you have said on DN Journal, on the domains, on Domain Name News, and all the other places that people have talked about what they expect this year. So this might not sound necessarily new, but I'd like to give it a different spin and a different context. And we're going to talk about 10 prophecies, 10 predictions that I think will happen this year. Let's start with the first one. This one's not going to be that controversial. We're going to see an increase in premium domain sales. In fact, I'm going to argue we're going to see a record year on name sales over the $5 million mark. If you recall, over the last couple of years, we haven't seen those numbers. This is the year that you will see companies take out the big checkbooks and buy big domain names. Let's go back and see what happened this past year. I mentioned that we were blessed with a very successful year, as were all our competitors as well, Media, Cedo. Everybody posted great numbers. These are just some of the sales. Of course, it started off with the most recent sale of sex.com. We saw slots.com, not on here, but medical marijuana, guns.com. So the Sin Lobby was well represented on the domain sales this past year. But besides just those names, let me highlight a story. Back in the summer, we were representing t-shirts.com. And as you guys know, we were looking to put that in the live auction. And as I always do, we want to kind of make that within this small club here of domainers. Shh, don't tell anybody else about it. Well, guess what, guys? End users now know about this. And they called us up and said, what's it going to take for me to take that name out of auction? So the team was like, well, the reserve is X, and if you want to give us 2X, I guess so. And how about $1.3 million? We're a costume company. We do Halloween costumes. And that's kind of a seasonal business. But what we want to do is dominate the generic category of t-shirts. And we're going to have a direct-to-consumer business. So do you think $1.3 million is a big or small investment for us to dominate a generic category? We think it's small. Can we buy that domain name? And sure enough, we had a sale that went through. I think that was a small example of what you're going to see again and again and again this year as companies and end users and retail customers realize the power of a premium domain name. If we'll go to the next slide, just another couple of examples. You guys know of some of these names, they get it. They're buying generics. When J&J owns Baby.com, or Amazon as part of Zappos owns Clothes.com, or Captain Morgan with Rum.com, B of A with Loans.com. These are all names you guys have seen before. It's still the minority. We are out there evangelizing. I know our peers are out there evangelizing. There are tons of companies that still don't get that they need to own the category for less than the cost of a 30-second television spot. They own the category for life. And I think, again, this year you'll see that happen. Well, which names do I think are going to sell? Here are a couple of examples. Some of these are in our auction. Some are being sold by our competitors. Gambling.com, Restaurants.com, XXX.com. These are all names that I believe will cross that $5 million threshold. And I'll be honest, guys, I know many of you have been involved in private transactions where you've sold names over $5 million, but you don't want to talk about it. And I get that, that's fine. But if you think about it, if we don't provide that data to the industry and tell them what a name is worth, we can't sell all the other names that are like that one. And if you're holding on to inventory and you don't disclose what that name price is, then everybody else can't benefit from that. But there's another message in here as well. We're going to see, I think, a split between the good quality and the not so good quality. When I was doing research for this slide, I looked at all our competitors on our own sites, and I saw a lot of names listed for more than $5 million. And it kind of was like those real estate offers where you see a lot of homes, you say, this is never going to sell. When you set prices for your domain names, think about it. It's not selling your children, as much as I know sometimes people feel, I can't put a price on that. Right? Think about this. There's going to be a limited pool of dollars. We're trying to increase that pool. Set those prices realistically, and you'll get more velocity. You'll get more turn. You'll get more people buying. And if we collectively do that, you'll get more people from outside the industry bringing money into the industry. So first prediction, again, not that controversial, but it's something that we can all do together, and I think we'll see a lot of sales this year. Let's move to our second one. There's been a lot of talk right now about what's going to happen in the registrar space. In fact, there's a lot of talk, as you guys know at ICANN, about all the different ways we can regulate ourselves. We can have governments regulate ICANN. ICANN regulate registries. Registries regulate registrars. And amidst the whole thing, what I think is going to happen through the news that you guys saw at the end of this past year is that we're going to see vertical consolidation, integration between those who own a registry, potentially owning a registrar as well. And that's going to have a big impact if you're a publisher, because you now have an opportunity to partner potentially with only one company, but it also could make those companies a much bigger competitor as well. Let me give you a couple of examples that I've seen already happen. On the .me, we see a partnership between Affilius and GoDaddy to run the .me registry. And we're very, very pleased that soon we're going to hear from Bob Parsons, never before in a domain gathering. We're very excited, obviously, not just about the Super Bowl commercials that we might get a peek at, but also his views about how does he think about this integration between registries and registrars. Newstar made an announcement, and we appreciate their sponsorships as well and their support of us. They made an announcement about white labeling their registry offering as people go after new GTLDs. One prediction that I will make is we won't see any new GTLDs approved this year, with the exception again of the .xxx, which is separate. But I do think there's going to be a lot of activity. Minds and Machines just raised $4.7 million. They asked the CEO, why'd you do that? He said, because of this change. Registries and registrars can combine. I think you'll see a lot of interest now. Monty Khan, Mike Perkins are setting up a new business. You guys saw that today. We wish them the best of luck. It's all about this same trend as well. VeriSign, for those who've seen, another big sponsor, and we appreciate their support. VeriSign has now sold off their security assets. They're solely in the domain name business in terms of name registrations. And they're sitting on a big pile of cash. And they're going to go after IDNs for .com and .net. But what else do you think they might go after? I don't know. There might be some companies that might be looking to be bought. So I think it'll be a really interesting space. Back to GTLDs, even though I don't think we'll see approvals this year, you'll see a tremendous amount of applications coming through and a lot of interest. And I'll tell you here, Oversea would love to be a partner. We ourselves, it's not part of our strategy to go after a new GTLD, but we do a pretty good auction. We've got pretty good brokerage. We know a little about domain monetization. So partner with us. We'd love to work with you on any of those services that you need when it comes time to launching your new GTLD. Let's move to our third prediction. This one actually was written originally to say, I think demand will go out. And I'm very pleased to say that they went out, and not only did they go out, but they went out spectacularly. And for all those people in the media and all those people in the room even that might have been naysayers, let's talk a little about this IPO. Demand Media is at its core a domain business. The core of their business, if you look at the slides that Richard talks about, is it's centered on eNom, bulk registrar, and the domains, 500,000 domains that they own. On top of that, they built a very good story and a very good business around content creation. But that infrastructure, that base, is domain names. no different than many of the other companies sitting in this room. And the fact that the market said to them, you guys are worth more than the New York Times, suggests that people get that there's real value in this new asset class. But before we all rush to kind of take a bunch of companies public, I think demand also teaches us a different lesson. And that is what I'm going to call the notion of a lighthouse IPO. Let me just show you some quick stats. Back in the real winter of IPOs, in 2007 there were a couple hundred, went down to 3 in technology. 2009 was 17. If any of you had venture capital friends, they weren't spending a lot of time on golf course during those times. Okay, this past year, things start to come back. 42 IPOs in the tech sector. It's predicted to be over 100 this year. But even though that number is large, going back to the demand story, I think what IPO now represents as an exit is only for particular companies that I would call lighthouse companies. The notion here is the market wants to pick a single customer, a single company, to define a new category. What are all these metrics around domains? What are all these metrics around, RPM and everything? Well, let's pick one company, let's get them public, and now there's public information available so investors can understand it. They can hear a story. And of course, if they're successful, they can make it safe for everybody else to get funded, to get invested in, potentially to get more companies being founded in that area. It's never hard to start a company today. With Amazon Web Services and all the different ways that you can get very, very cheap funding, nobody has problems starting companies. The big challenge everybody has is how to exit, how to get that liquidity. And I think what you'll see from some of the examples of companies that went public this past year is each of them represented this notion of being first in a segment, and if they're successful, defining that segment so that people after them would come afterwards and be able to benefit from that. Let's talk about Quinn Street. It's a little business that we know a little bit about. They went public back in February, 53% price rise since they went public. Now people understand what lead gen is. Now people understand what's going on in the education space or insurance. Reach Local, another, this is an LA-based company in local ads. They've been spending a lot of money to try and get into the local space and create local sales force. They're up 60%. Green Dot, just another example here in Los Angeles, stored value cards. They're providing the banking for the unbanked, people that can't get credit cards, up 75%. Real D in kind of the 3D space, and of course demand so far up 18%, although I didn't check the stock price this morning. All of these, I think, represent a small segment of what people are looking for in terms of investors being able to define a new category. And as such, I think they represent lighthouse IPOs. They're specific, they're named, they tell a story. But the real exits, the real money is going to be made in my next prediction. There's going to be a record year in M&A within large tech companies looking for innovation from smaller tech companies. Let me show you some data. We talked about IPOs in 2010. When you take all technology IPOs, both primary and secondary offerings, that means that anytime they issue shares, there was about $6 billion in 2010. It's a lot of money, but let's compare that to M&A in 2010. $17 billion. It's a lot more money. Still relatively small to, I think, what can happen. Last year, there were 400 different M&A transactions in the technology space in 2010. When you talk to bankers, you talk to companies, they're all recognizing now that we're seeing this consolidation around a couple of large companies. Who are those large companies? Let's take 5 of them, and let's look at what's happening right now on their balance sheets. These top 5 technology companies, who are all active acquirers, each one of these has made billion-dollar transactions in the last 12 months. Together represent $137 billion. If you take the top 25 tech companies, so throw in Cisco and Adobe and other companies, over $230 billion is sitting on balance sheets waiting to be invested. I believe that investment will happen in the form of M&A. In our own industry, a lot smaller scale, but we saw 2 great exits this year. We saw BIP invest and buy out NameDrive. And again, I don't know if that's yet been talked about, but I think that's something that's great for the industry. And we saw Register.com sell to Web.com. Those are great transactions. They're small, they're early, but I think they start to show a trend of how people are starting to consolidate and see value in the assets that we're creating. My prediction is we're going to see a huge bunch more of people looking at M&A as their exit. And why do I keep focusing on exit? Because investors need to know when they give you the original money, they know when they're going to get it back. And for all of us in this room that are looking to make money because we have an opportunity to get investors on board, you have to show them the exit at the same time you show them the entrance. That's critical for them. And again, I don't think it's going to happen from IPOs. It's going to happen from the M&A side. So it's exciting because it means liquidity is coming back. People are willing to invest. We're going to get a lot more money in the space. And as I've talked to you guys every year I've been up here, follow the money. When you see the money coming in, it means we're going to all do well. When the money starts getting pulled out, it means it might be time to find another business. Now, the next prediction might be a little bit more controversial. And I want to give before I even talk about it, this has nothing to do with the domain team headed up so ably by Hal Bailey. And he's here in the room today. I think everybody would agree with me. He single-handedly, with his team, fights for the rights of domainers and for the perspective of domainers every day up in the Googleplex. But overall, if you look at the trends and if you read the media, what's happening is Google's now kind of the poster child for let's beat up on them a little bit. Well, what's happening? Let's look a little bit at what's happening here, okay? They made an announcement a couple of months ago that they're going to buy ITA software in the travel industry. Those things usually go through pretty quickly. And then everybody came out and talked to the DOJ and said, here's why I don't think that's such a good idea. By the way, no different than when Microsoft said they were going to start buying companies. And people start piling onto this bandwagon. Look what's happening in Europe right now. Europe's got an antitrust inquiry into Google, and it's broader than just what's happening on AdWords and AdSense. You will see a lot of regulation. You'll see a lot of people kind of pointing fingers now and saying, wait a second, why are they allowed to be this big? Why are they allowed to be this powerful? And pretty important for us, what's happening on the publisher side, what's happening on the partnership side. This was a really interesting news piece. I don't know if you saw. There's a company out of Israel, which is the leader in downloadable software applications. They had an AdSense contract that did over $100 million, and they just announced that they're leaving Google for Microsoft Bing. That's pretty big, okay, for a company that had traditionally always gained share through all the problems that the other search engines were having. For Bing now to win back a big customer, I think is a big sign. And the last piece that I think is important is look at this quote from Expedia. And I could have picked a quote from TripAdvisor, Expedia, or any other company that actually, or Kayak, who's going public, and that's why they can't talk about it. Any of these companies in the past would never, ever go public with any kind of negative statement about Google because it's the hand that feeds them. We're seeing this shift a little bit. The impact, though, can be positive. And that is Google, and we've seen it in every new product initiative they've done. How do we work with you? How do we think about this new JavaScript? How do we think about new DNS redirects? How do we think about new ways on mobile advertising? What do you guys think? What are the ways that we can partner together? That's a very healthy sign of how we're going to go together to dominate the marketplace. And if I can compare what I think Google's going through here, it's no different than the long trend of dominant companies in technology. It starts with this first phase that we adore them. You remember when Google first started and Larry Page, the first time he was CEO, could do no wrong, right? We're the do no evil company. Everyone loved them because they were going after Microsoft. And it was all about kind of they were the big bad players. So they were adored. Everyone loved them. You couldn't find a negative article about them. And then what happens is they get onto some platform and they consolidate. They aggregate 1 billion users. They aggregate 3 million advertisers. And now we move from adoration to I got to revere them. They make the decisions, we've got to listen. And that phase happens in every single time we have a platform that gets determined. And then we go into this phase where people start to question it. Well, it's now fun to kind of, we built them all up, let's tear them down now. And they start to be questioned. And if I go back to the logos here back in the 80s, this exact cycle happened to IBM, and Microsoft was the upstart. And then in the 90s, Microsoft was the big behemoth, and Google was the upstart. And guess what now, guys? We're seeing it play over again right now with Facebook. We're going to talk a lot about Facebook because of our keynote address on Thursday with Ben Mesrick, who literally had an inside view when he spent the year 2008 together with the co-founder of Facebook, and you guys know the rest because it's a great movie. Ben wrote the book, and we're going to talk to him on Thursday about this. But this same exact trend where you see a startup be innovative, take the lunch from the big player who's getting a little complacent, and then become the dominant player, and the cycle starts again. Now, I, for one, would definitely not rule Google out. And I point this out as a prediction. I think they'll be more partner-friendly. They will still be extraordinarily powerful and dominant because look at how smart they've been about moving out from just search. Look at what they've done on the operating system level. Look at what they've done with mobile. Look at what they've done with video. Eli gave some great stats about how many people go to Google. 2/3 of every searches still go to Google. That domination, I think, is still important. And what it means is if you're a smaller player, it's not that you can't work with them, it's you got to figure out how to work with them. They are the platform. How do you work with them? I'm going to come back to that idea soon. So the next prediction is let's talk a little bit more about Facebook. Facebook, obviously, everybody knows about it. I got to tell you, Eli hit his story about what happens in social. My story is I'm like the PC guy in those commercials with Apple. You know, it takes me a long time to adopt technology. And I've had many, many people in this room, and I thank you again and again, how now you only talk to me through Facebook. And you know I can't stand it because I can't copy anybody, I can't delegate, I can't share with anybody because it's just between us and Facebook. But that notion that now all of you guys are spending your communication, your time spent, that engagement, which is happening on Facebook, is definitely a trend that we're seeing all over the place. So now the question is, how are you going to make money on it? And all of us who think about that question every day jumps to the first conclusion. Oh, I'm going to go buy traffic on Facebook and send it to one of my sites. Oh, I'm going to do lead gen on Facebook. Well, guess what? I think all of us are going to continue to try that. But I'd submit to you, and it's actually not my idea, but Carla Clark, who's one of our top customer service reps out in our Florida office, she gave me this idea, which is don't focus so much on new customer acquisition. Think about social networks on customer retention. Think about your customer service efforts and how Facebook and other social networking tools will help you on that. And here's some great examples. Probably the company that's got one of the worst customer service reputations is the old Ma Bell, right? AT&T, the old Pac Bell, the old SBC. Everybody hates the phone company. And they figured this out and said, well, we got to get on this Facebook thing. We got to figure out how to answer people's questions. And they're doing it. And we took a page out of their book, and now look at what we're doing, Snap Names and Moniker. If you've got questions now, we've got folks on Facebook every day, and they become great opportunities. You can see here it's in small print, but somebody came to us and said, look, I know I've been registering names with you, but how do you monetize names? Oh, great. We've got this sister company called Domain Sponsor. And that customer retention activity, which then leads to an upsell, is happening within the walls of Facebook. Here are a couple of other examples. You know, we talked a little bit about Twitter before. You know, they gave out awards recently for the best customer service experience only online. Is it a surprise that Starbucks won? Starbucks gets this in the offline world. They're certainly going to be thinking about it in the online world. And my favorite example from Twitter is the city of San Francisco, which, as many governments are, usually tone deaf when it comes to complaints from their citizens. They figured out by using a Twitter account that now you can let them know on any pothole, any problem that you're seeing in your neighborhood, any street sign that needs to be repaired. They actually have this Twitter feed now coming from citizens in that neighborhood to let them know about problems. And I have a great story. A friend of mine was just in San Diego. He had a 2-year-old daughter, and he was staying at the W. And I know many of you probably stay at that hotel, generally not seen as a friendly place for children. So he's got his 2-year-old daughter, and she's having a great time. They've got the mini bar open, and who knows what's happening. So he's watching the scene of his daughter tearing up the room, and he sends a little tweet out. And it says, oh boy, I hope I get invited back. Mia's tearing up the room. Sends it out to his friends. Next morning, he wakes up, pulls out his mobile device, and there's a tweet back, San Diego W. Dear sir, please let Mia know she's always welcome back in our hotel at any time. Okay? Think about that. There was no face-to-face interaction. They figured out in this big stream of tweets that there was a customer in their hotel who was making a comment about their service, and they had that immediate opportunity to take advantage of it and turn what would have been a negative situation into a customer for life. My friend said every time he goes to San Diego now, he's staying at the W. And that was because they recognized how to use this social network side for their customer service. I'll use one more example. As you guys know, we run a travel comparison site, Low Fares. We have over 50,000 fans. We've been spending a lot of time thinking about how to engage our audience on Facebook. And one of the things that we realized was they're not leaving Facebook and then saying, I want to do a travel search. And even though it's still new, and you saw that stats from Eli earlier this morning, people are realizing if this is where I'm spending my time, 30 minutes on average per session, they're on travel, they're on Facebook. Well, then what we did was we brought the desktop website into Facebook. So our travel comparison app, which is really just a search for fares, is now an app within Facebook. And our 50,000 plus fans are able to use that to tell each other about, hey, where are you going for Christmas? Well, try out this flight. This is a great flight. And we're finding we don't even have to invest in the customer support the same way. We're able to leverage those tools. So just some trends, some things to think about. How can you take advantage of the social networking? I think the killer app is going to be customer support. Let's move now to prediction number 7. Now, we talked about mobile was going to be huge, and it's not hard to say it's already here, it's already huge. There's going to be a lot more devices that are considered handheld than desktop. And frankly, let's be honest with each other, as a domainer, gets a little bit nervous, right? wait a second, if I leave people off the desktop and now bring them to a mobile, what happens to the browser? Aren't these guys now accessing apps the whole time? And what happens to people typing in my domain name? Uh-oh, that might not be good for us. And that's a real trend that we think about. But I'd submit to you what's really happening here and what's something to watch is look what's happening within mobile. And someone asked this question earlier today. I think the real trend to watch here is look at how Apple has solved the right form factor. It's about the 7-inch tablet. Let me first give you some stats on this. You guys have seen this every time I talk. I love bringing up Mary Meeker's data here. This trend continues to be amazing. If you just take the Apple infrastructure of iPhone, iTouch, and iPad and look at the number of quarters since launch, so it's about 3.5 years now, and look at that compared to all the other different aspects of technology adoption, it is far and away the fastest growing trend we've ever seen. All of you here have some kind of Apple device, and probably, I'd say 5 years ago, many of you were not Apple customers at all. And I'm sure most of you are now realizing not only are, and I see it here with the laptops here, not only are you an iPhone or an iPad, suddenly you're getting iMacs and you're getting the computers for your house as well. But I think the trend that I find really interesting, especially is when we think about where do we develop? You know, I had a friend that was running a baseball fantasy site, and he was coming up with version 2.0. So I said, so what are you going to do? You getting some, web developers, some HTML? He says, no, we're not even creating a desktop app. We're only doing a mobile app, and we're doing a tablet app. And that was pretty interesting, because what it suggested to me is he's recognizing the type of people he wants. It's not just the guys that want to check in quickly on their iPhone or on their Android device. They want to interact with that device. And the small form factor doesn't do it as well as the larger form factor that still is mobile. And that's really been the power of the iPad. Now, from a unit count, we're still going to see obviously more units sold on phones because everyone's going to have a cell phone. But there's going to be over 100 million tablets sold over the next couple of years. Here's a great quote to kind of show you that. Tablet adoption is occurring at an even faster pace than the smartphone, computer, MP3 players, game consoles, etc. And it's because Steve Jobs, and to his credit, in the brilliance of figuring out what do people like, they like carrying around this device because it's big enough to do some editing, it's big enough to look at spreadsheets, it's big enough to do some PowerPoint, but it's small enough and portable enough to take with you. And I saw this great study from some very kind of expert folks thinking about consumer trends. And they said, what is it about the tablet? Everybody's got a mobile device, it's portable. But the tablet is going to be your personal device. Think about your computers at home. How many of you, probably like me, have to share that with other family members? Your cell phone you don't share with anybody, but how much browsing can you really do on a cell phone? But your iPad or your next Android device, and if I can show you the next slide here, just look at how many different manufacturers are now coming out with the exact same form factor, 7-inch. You're going to see it from Dell, Windows versions, Motorola with Zoom, even though they're running on Android. 7 inches, that's going to be the ticket. And as a developer, I think that helps you think about then who's your target audience. Sure, we're going to see a growth in applications and apps, but I think you're going to still see that there's going to be a role for the browser. And Google, I believe, won't be spending as much money as they are on two competing platforms, where they've got the Android and they still have Chrome, if they didn't believe that there still was going to be a desktop, or at least a tethered desktop approach to web development. So that's our 7th prediction. And now let's put together the last couple of predictions. I mentioned a little bit about Google and kind of what's happening. And there's this notion of consolidation now in each area for certain industry leaders that are going to be the platform dominant player. Search is easy. I don't think anyone's going to catch Google. They own it. Social, Facebook owns it. What's the difference? Google has 1 billion users and 3 to 4 million advertisers on search. Very hard for someone to break into that. On social, Facebook's crossed 600 million users, and they're building that advertiser base very quickly. Just think about running a campaign. We thought about this. I want to target females between 29 to 39 with an income level of this. How do you do that on search? But Facebook, you can do that. So there's a bunch of brand dollars that are now going to come online, and it's going to come online to Facebook. I'm not here to tell you if I think $50 billion is worth it or not, but that is one of the reasons why so many people jumped on that offering. Within mobile, clearly I think Apple has dominated that. And again, not necessarily the only player. Android as an open system will clearly be another player there. But the notion that they've got an all-in-one system, while it is closed, think about the Ad Center product, think about what they're doing in terms of locking in advertisers, they're going to be the dominant player. We don't talk too much about retail, but let me bring up another example, Amazon. For those who are not watching here, they will be the dominant player for e-commerce. Amazon now has over 100 million people coming to their site, and they're converting about 10 to 15% of them to their Prime. Why is Prime so important? It's not just about free shipping, because that's going to be their killer to Netflix. How many merchants work with Amazon as their back-end distribution fulfillment? Thousands, tens of thousands. How many users are now realizing that they're going to Amazon to do their searching? The only reason I point that out is because I think just like if you want to play in e-commerce, and we're now in the retail space, so we play there too, we now have to interact with them. They're going to be a dominant player. How do you partner with them? How do you add value to their ecosystem? Let's talk a little about local. This might be the area that isn't over yet, but how is Groupon turning down $6 billion? Well, I'll share a story with you that isn't public that was pretty interesting because it got me thinking a lot. We buy a little bit of search, a lot of search, and one of the places that we buy it for is our travel property. So we're looking for keywords. We're looking for people that are traveling, between San Francisco and Las Vegas, and people want to stay in a hotel room. And as we're competing in that space, we started to see this company come up again and again, and it was Groupon. Wait, what's the local deal, for a local merchant for travel? It has nothing to do with that. They're in this land grab for over 50 million users that they already have email addresses, relationships with, and that's what they've raised all this money for. They could, I'm not saying they are already, but they could dominate the local space. So therefore, if you've got a website that's going to have to think about how do you attach monetization to that, you're going to have to work with a company like Groupon, maybe Living Social, who've established themselves as the platform. This trend in technology happens in every single segment. We're going to crown a leader, they set the standards, everybody loves those standards, and then we find a way to work with them. So I think as you think about some of these predictions, I'd keep these trends in mind. Let's keep moving. Let's talk about now the end user side. How do you get closer to end users? I think this year you'll see a lot more development focusing on reducing the number of clicks to get to, excuse me, the actual application functionality. A lot of big words. Let me just use a story, it'll be a lot simpler. You guys are probably very familiar with this picture. Anybody here ever been to Disneyland or Disney World? Oh my God, usually it's a lot bigger. All right. You guys ever been on a line before? Wait at the airport? Yeah. Everyone hates lines, right? Well, I read this article, and it was kind of interesting. Disneyland has been around here in Los Angeles for over 50 years. And guess what? They've had lines for over 50 years. And for the most part, nobody ever complains. And the last couple of months, literally it's very recent, they've now had to kind of re-engineer their lines because people are getting impatient. What happens when you have a device that turns on right away and you get your email? And you don't wait for your boot up sequence and waiting to kind of log into Windows or for the internet to work. Right? We're now in this kind of immediate gratification. Everyone needs their apps to work right away, and people are realizing that's going to be the new paradigm for any application that you develop. And let me give you a couple of examples of this now happening. Let's start with search. I always tell people that what's the #1 parking page in the world? Google.com. How many display ads do you see on Google.com? How many other links do you see on Google.com? How many other different colors and fonts do you see? You don't. It's one white box, type in your search here. That's the #1 parking page. Well, now when you go to their search results, though, look what's happening. I put in a search into, just give me a second, let me stay on Google for a second. So let's look at hiking boots. So Google now, and I think it's all innovation, they're now giving you a lot more choice. They're giving you ways to kind of refine your search. Do you want to do it by brands, stores, types, how to buy, pictures? Search has evolved, and Google obviously is leading this by saying, let me give you a lot more choices. But it's also starting to get a little more cluttered. And you guys have all been reading the press recently about how valuable are the organic results on Google. And I definitely predict that this year you'll see a lot of changes coming out on their organic side for how do they manage what is considered by some to be less quality traffic. I won't use the spam world. I keep kosher, so I won't talk about that. But there are different points of view about quality traffic, right? And I think in Google's case, they're learning about, okay, how much do you give people a lot of different choices, and how much do you have to kind of, if you think about, find ways to editorialize those results. So I looked at some startups and said, well, how are they handling this problem? Let's look at one you guys might have heard about called Bleco. Bleco is a cross between some editors and people that are taking more of a wiki approach to say, you know what, I'm going to decide what's considered good content or not, and they take things out of the index. And this is kind of an ongoing process. Look at a little bit cleaner now. Less choices, more relevant results. Let's take it a step further. Quickie is something that's brand new. One of our engineers pointed this out to me. And they've got it now defined to some very specific action. People want to see a video, and it's kind of cool. It's actually an automated search result that gets read out to you while you see the picture, and there's 1 or 2 action buttons. They clearly have to get good about guessing what the user wants, but look at that progression. From Google giving you tons of links, tons of choices, to now somebody just giving you a video, easy to interact. I'll share another example. It's just a story here. There's a startup that I've been talking to before I show about creditcards.com. There's a company that they're figuring out, okay, if we were going to set up a new search engine, what do people really want to do when they're searching? Are they looking for information, possibly? Or are they looking to do something? How do I shorten that step between searching and doing? And their startup idea, which I think is fantastic, is they're calling it Do It or Do-At. Let me find a way to do something. The way their search engine works is, let's take the movie Avatar. Type in Avatar. Today on Google, if you type that in, what you'll see is a bunch of results like IMDb database and different things about reviews and stuff like that. But most people that are probably searching for that want to watch it, might want to rent it, might want to buy it. So what their search engine does is it brings back app results. Netflix, IMDb, it might be an Amazon to buy the CD, buy the DVD. And you're getting the result directly into the application. So people are seeing the functionality directly. This notion about getting the user closer to the action they want to take, I think, is a huge theme for web development. And now let me show you some examples from our own applications. On the desktop side, we launched this year creditcards.org. One of the things behind that site in our consumer finance area was, how do we get the user all the information on one page, but that they can take action? And what you can see here is we rank credit cards, and that apply here is very big. And we've done all the A/B testings, and that shows this is where you put that button, because this is what the end users want to do. So as you think about performance marketing type sites that you have, think about how much are you engaging that end user into taking an action. Let me give you some other examples. We launched a very creative site that came out of some work that we were doing about studying the demographic of our travel site. We realized that over 70% of our users were females, and they like to actually make the hotel decision. For those guys in the room, you probably can relate to this, that, you know, let them make the decision, they know where they want to stay. So we started a site called thehotelhostess.com. We've got all the social aspects to there. You see people can like that. It's a cleaner interface. And if you add one more click here, what we're leveraging here is the notion that what do people really want to do? It's not just on the desktop. They want a site in the travel area that's location aware, that also knows what their friends are saying. This example, by the way, did not come because me or anybody on my team figured out what people wanted. It's because we did an experiment this year. And it was fantastic. It was something that our employees came up with. We called it Hack Day. We took a bunch of folks, actually 40 folks, so it was almost about 20% of our staff, and they decided to spend the entire night coming up with ideas. We had a little contest. And this was one of the winning sites, this one and the next one I'm going to show you, that people came up with ideas for how to create a way to just hack together APIs on social, ways to do mobile geo-aware type code with existing products and features that we have. Let me show you one of the examples of the winner on that. We don't have that. Okay, so another example of this is about airport parking. This is an application that we had purchased and now we're rolling out on the tablet. And why do I want to show you this? Because this is one of the few sites that we run today that I think will be emblematic of what all of us will want to run. And that is an end user in their car can directly buy the service that they want. In this case, you're driving near LAX. If you're here in LA, we give you the results, we give you the ratings, we give you the ability, if it stores your credit card, to already just make that reservation. Now, how useful would that be if you're driving around and all the lots are filled? Pretty useful, right? You can't do that from a desktop internet. But you got your tablet or your mobile device, you'll be able to do that. Again, small example, most of our properties, we're still in kind of that early phase. But think about getting close to that user. Think about ways you can bring that functionality closer to them. All right, let's go to the 9th prediction. This one's going to be a lot of fun. All of us here think about our domain names. If it's not on a generic side, it's on a traffic side. And many of us do this all the time. Well, let's think about visitors. How much are the visitors worth? Well, it depends on the category. And we've got different notions about how much each of these things are worth. I think what you can see this year is a turning point as people start to value traffic and really value users on more than just, okay, what does that category pay? It's going to be based on also what's the value of that data. Are there other people that would value the notion of what this traffic might represent? Is there a predictive aspect of this user? To even use the terms that are kind of forbidden by old media, is there behavioral targeting or profiling? I know this is extraordinarily important because let's see what happens over the last couple of months on the Wall Street Journal. For those who've been following this, the journal ran not less than 25 different stories about how bad behavioral targeting is and how worried you should be because you've been tracked on the internet. And now people know who you are and what you're looking for. By the way, Kelly Conlon and I were sitting at lunch, she talked about this. No different than offline. You think when you sign up for a magazine or you call up QVC and buy something, they don't know the same exact things about you? The reason why people do it, it works. We love to see the ads that are relevant to us. You know, I'll just tell another story. At home, I was surfing around ESPN because, you know, that's kind of a cool thing for me to do. At least my kids tell me that. And I see all these ads pop up, display ads for home remodeling, fixtures, bathroom fixtures, new tiles. And I'm saying to myself, wait a second here. I haven't been surfing these sites. This is not an ESPN ad. So sure enough, I asked my wife, and I found out we're doing a little addition in the house. And I don't think I would have known that without behavioral targeting. And by the way, word to the wise, it works the other way too. So wherever else you're surfing, your kids know that too, all right? Back to the personal device. Anyway, this is a huge trend. And it's one that all of us here who think about traffic every single day are going to be able to ride. Let me give you a couple of examples of this. You guys have probably all been to the ad tech conferences, and you love to see this huge slide that shows you all the different players in the DSP space and the ad space and the different ways that people are interacting. Let's kind of shade this out and focus just on a couple of companies, some of which are in the room here today. These 6 folks, and actually just today, Chango announced a new raise. You've heard about Exalate, Magnetic, BlueKai. All of these guys have raised over $100 million of venture funding to date, because what they're bringing people is how to match up the data, the value of that data, with people that are buying it. If you're a domain owner and you've got that traffic, think about that. That's going to be very valuable if you can leverage it to somebody who's going to use that data to create a better user experience. And that's why this is important. It's not about, you know, how we're going to track people and figure out what they're looking for. It's making it valuable for them, making it useful for them. And so the final example I want to use here is, again, from our properties. Peter talked about our new announcement that we're very excited about, which is the Precision Targeting Engine. And this is actually a platform for future ways that we can learn more about users. It starts with a single point of contact for us to be able to aggregate CPC, CPA, direct advertisers. But it's a platform. We're building technology that it's going to allow us to be ahead of the game to understand what do users want in the search space. When they come to a set of domains, what are they really looking for? Can I leverage that information and get them closer to the value that they're really looking for? If I do, they convert more, advertisers are happy, and the users are happy, and we add more value. So we're up to our last prediction, and I thought it would be something that we kind of help the city of Los Angeles here. You know, we're about to talk about GoDaddy and the Super Bowl commercials, and we're very excited that Bob's here with us now. And so we're going to talk about pro football, and you know, I was thinking, how am I going to link all these different themes together? So people want to know what's overseas strategy. You guys have a little bit of money in the bank, so you must be buying something. What do you guys think you're going to buy? And I thought, well, maybe the prediction that I can go out here without revealing too much is we want to bring professional football to Los Angeles. Now, I know all you guys who know me well, I don't pay retail, and $500 million is pretty expensive to bring a new team to Los Angeles. So, given that there's going to be a lockout coming soon, I recruited a new team that we're going to be calling the LA Overseers. And these are the crack 11 folks that form together one of the best front and back lines in the entire industry. You've got a set of folks here, and these are obviously our sales reps across moniker, snap names, and domain sponsor, who take the hits, who take the shots, who do the blocking and tackling with all of you every single day, and I think they're the best team in the industry. So if you join me in giving a big round of applause to our sales team. And they're going to help bring us professional football to Los Angeles. Now, in all seriousness, I want to wrap up now. What do I think about the trends that we're seeing here? Let's go back to our little allegory that we had from the Ten Commandments. There were 3 things that I took out of that movie. And that was, at the time of the Exodus, right? Think about what was happening. There was a shared value among this people. There was going to be a common platform, one religion, one nation, one language, one set of laws. There was going to be an optimism for the future that would lead to new innovations. By the way, I'm not sure who came up with the idea of kosher, so I don't know if that innovation was that great. But there were some new things that came when this people got together. And most importantly, there were some very clear exit options as you saw them crossing the Red Sea. But these same notions, I think, are the 3 themes that I want to leave you with. Let's start with the first one. This year, I think you will see this emergence of key industry leaders dominating their segments. But unlike in the past, where it was all Microsoft or all IBM, I don't think it's going to be all Google. I think you're going to see Google dominate in their area, Apple dominate in their area, Amazon, maybe Groupon, maybe GoDaddy, maybe other folks. Think about those companies. How do you partner with them? How do you leverage them? How do you add value to their ecosystem? The second key trend is there's going to be a premium on innovation, but specifically is how to get closer to the consumers. You want to get customer engagement. We talked earlier this morning about the ComScore data. Everything is measured on how close you can get to your customers. If there's anything we learned about why Facebook was so successful, is they recognize that people want to know from the people they already know. And the more you can sell within that, the more successful you are. People don't sell to strangers. So how do you get to know your customers better? How do you think about innovations that allow you to provide real value that comes from the fact that you watch their behavior and you know when they're about to buy something that you can be there with that innovative product or service? Because if you do that, you're adding real value to the ecosystem. And the last trend, of course we need money, of course we need exits, and we're going to see a lot of that exit capital through the large tech M&A and the lighthouse IPOs. When you combine these three themes, this is why I'm so optimistic about our industry and our opportunities. There's going to be some tremendous opportunities to create value this year. Not in 2 years or 3 years, this year. And if you create the value, as demand media has shown us, it's not going to be hard to extract that value. But you got to first create it. As always, I always want to thank everybody for coming to DomainFest and participating. We see this as part networking. We also see it as part learning from each other. These are just my thoughts. I want to pause here and see if there's any Q&A or what your thoughts might be. I look forward to answering any of your questions. And then we're going to move on to our next keynote. So questions?